TrueStory Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot.
Today,
TrueStory Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. Ziliara Askrith awoke before sunrise, the pale glow of dawn seeping through the tall, arched windows of her workshop. At 25, she had inherited obsidian and ash atelier from her grandmother, a delicate balance of art and grit perched on Willow Falls cobblestone market. Inside, rows of vintage sewing machines stood sentinel over reclaimed oak tables piled high with hand-dyed fabrics. Spools of thread and silver, charcoal, and midnight blue lined the shelves like liquid rainbows. Her daughter, Zyphron Keld, for years old and impossibly curious, padded into the studio barefoot, clutching a miniature doll wrapped in a scrap of velvet. Zyphron's laughter, bright as wind chimes, echoed off the stone walls and softened Ziliara's fatigue. She lifted her daughter onto a high stool, brushing a stray curl from Zyphron's forehead before draping her in a child-sized cloak embroidered with obsidian moths, a signature motif of the atelier. By 6 o'clock, customers trickled in through the front door. Local mothers seeking custom-fit children's jackets, visiting artisans scouting unique textiles, and tourists drawn by the atelier's glowing review in the regional craft magazine. Ziliara greeted each with a warm smile, guiding them through hand-stitched scarves and silk-lined capes. She measured little wrists and shoulders with practiced precision, her fingers dancing over tape measures and notepads. Every order she accepted represented hours of midnight quilting and color mixing at her dye table. Midday sunlight filtered through the skylights as Ziliara settled Zyphron beside her on a low bench. The girl drew intricate patterns in chalk along the worn floorboards while Ziliara sipped chamomile tea. For a few precious moments, the world felt calm until the distant rumble of an engine signaled the day's second storm. Her husband, Vorinth Syra, returned from another cross-country run. At 28, he should have been her partner in both business and life, but long hours behind the wheel had hardened him. When Vorinth stepped through the door, uniform rumpled and eyes clouded with fatigue, he barely acknowledged Zyphron's eager wave. Instead, he inspected the scattered scraps of patterned fabric and half-finished orders. "Ziliara," he said, voice rough as gravel. "You've got pieces everywhere. This place looks like a textile graveyard." His words fell heavy. Zyphron flinched and buried her face in her doll's velvet wrap. Ziliara's chest tightened. She closed her eyes for a slow count of 4. "These are live orders, Vorinth. I shipped 5 custom cloaks to Chicago yesterday." He scoffed, tossing his satchel onto a back bench. "Meanwhile, other women run online boutiques and make 6 months' rent in a week. You're still scraping by." He stalked past her, leaving an ache in the empty space he left behind. Afternoon shadows darkened the studio as Ziliara finished a delicate hem on a linen tunic. She pressed the tension out of her shoulders and whispered to Zyphron, "Mommy's almost done, my star." Zyphron's bright blue eyes lifted, trust and hope shining through her tear-glazed lashes. Before Ziliara could pack away her tools, Zyphron's fever spiked. Small hands pressed to her forehead, hot as embers. Panic propelled Ziliara across the studio and into the crisp morning air. She bundled Zyphron in layers of wool, ignoring the sting of wind, and raced to the county hospital. Under harsh fluorescent lights, a team of pediatric nurses sprawled 4 lines and wrapped Zyphron in blankets. Ziliara hovered, heart pounding, while monitors beeped in a frantic rhythm. 2 hours later, Zyphron's temperature broke, and her eyes fluttered open, trusting but fragile. The bill arrived like a guillotine's blade, an amount that eclipsed every sale she'd made last month. Ziliara's hands shook as she signed the payment plan, already calculating how many scarves she'd have to stitch through the night. When they returned to the atelier, the morning had shifted into golden dusk. Zyphron slept on the low bench beside half-finished capes and bolts of cashmere. Ziliara fussed over the blankets until the girls stirred, then lifted her with gentle determination. She clutched Zyphron close, mind already racing through her to-do list. Finish orders, balance the books, reassure Vorinth, who had not once called. Back in their cramped living quarters behind the studio, Vorinth flipped through channels, remote in hand, without a word. Zyphron drifted into a light sleep on Ziliara's lap. With every soft breath from her daughter, Ziliara's resolve hardened. She would reshape their lives stitch by careful stitch. No more empty compliments, no more crushing bills. Before the final thread was secured on her sewing machine, Ziliara whispered, "I'll make this work, Zyphron. For you, Mama will build something beautiful." Outside, Willow Fall's lanterns flickered on, and the first stars glimmered above Ember and Ash Atelier, promising another dawn. Zyphron Keld's fever struck like a sudden storm. Just as dawn's first light filtered through the atelier's tall windows, Ziliara Asgrith heard her daughter's soft whimper from the back room. She dropped the spool of thread and raced barefoot across the creaking floorboards, heart pounding as she found 4-year-old Zyphron trembling beneath a pile of blankets.
Lira, no, Zyphron.
Ziliara scooped her daughter into her arms. Zyphron's skin was burning hot, her tiny body curled in discomfort. Panic rose in Ziliara's chest, but she forced calm into her voice. "It's okay, baby. We're going to the hospital now." In the hazy glow of dawn, Ziliara wrapped Zyphron in layers of scarves she had just finished stitching the night before. She wove a quick braid in her daughter's dark hair, kissed her forehead, and dashed out the atelier doors into the crisp autumn air. The gas street lamps flickered as she hailed a cab, clutching Zyphron tight. At the county hospital, antiseptic tang filled the corridors. A nurse guided Ziliara to a pediatric wing, where monitors beeped steadily. A doctor examined Zyphron's wrist for a pulse. "High fever," the doctor said gravely. "We'll need to keep her overnight for observation." Ziliara nodded, throat tight. She signed consent forms with trembling hands and watched as Zyphron was settled into a crib topped with crisp white sheets. Each machine attached to her daughter's small arm felt like another string tightening around Ziliara's heart. The fluorescent lights hummed with cruel insistence. Time, money, struggle. Alone in the waiting area, Ziliara pulled out her phone and dialed Vorinth. Her thumb hovered over call as her daughter's soft cries echoed from behind the double doors. When he finally answered, his words were clipped. "Your daughter?" Vorinth's voice crackled. "I'm on the road." "I can't." "She's in the ER," Ziliara whispered. "Please come." The silence was immediate, like a door slamming shut. "I'm busy," he said at last. "Figure it out yourself." And with that, he hung up. The line went dead. Ziliara's breath caught. She pressed her hand to her mouth, staring at her phone as though it had betrayed her. With a raw inhale, she strode back to Zyphron's room. Doctors and nurses flitted about, drawing blood, inserting 4 lines. Ziliara hovered beside the crib, stroking her daughter's hair and whispering lullabies against the sterile roar of the machines. Late that night, Zyphron's fever broke. Blue veins faded behind her translucent cheeks. Her breathing slowed to even, shallow sighs. A nurse gave Ziliara a tired smile. "She's stable now," she said. "You can hold her for a bit." Ziliara cradled Zyphron, tears leaking down her face. She rocked her daughter until sleep claimed her again. When she laid Zyphron back into the crib, Ziliara pressed her palm to the monitor screen as if sealing a promise. "I'll protect you, my brave star." Exhaustion weighed around her shoulders like lead. She sank onto a vinyl chair, eyes drifting closed, until her phone buzzed. A text message from Vorinth. "Don't bother asking me to pick you up. I'll wire what you owe." Elation flared in her chest. Payment. But with it came burning disgust. He didn't ask how Zyphron was. He didn't apologize or offer to drive hundreds of miles home. He simply calculated the cost. With shaking fingers, Ziliara dialed Vorinth again. She recorded the call on her phone, something she'd learned to do when his tone grew harsh. This time he picked up after 2 rings. "Listen," she said, voice straining. Our daughter's life has been in danger, and you can't even be here. Why, instead of worrying about the bills, didn't you care to ask if she was okay? Vorntha's voice dropped to a cold whisper. That's none of your business, Ziliara. I work hard, and I don't need lectures. Just send me numbers. She pressed redial. By now, her anger outweighed her heartbreak. You think she's just another expense? You're her father. Show some responsibility. His laughter was brittle. If you want a partner in this, maybe you should choose someone who doesn't disappear the moment life gets hard. Then he slammed the phone down. Ziliara stared at the silent receiver. A single tear fell onto the muted glow of her phone screen. Vorntha's cruelty had always been there, but never so stark, so nakedly callous. She tucked the phone into her pocket and leaned into Zyphron's crib. I love you, she murmured. I promise I'll fix this. Over the next few hours, Ziliara lay beside her sleeping daughter. Mind racing. When the first staff members started their rounds at sunrise, she gently lifted Zyphron, bundled her in layers of soft blankets, and wheeled the crib out of the room. She navigated the maze of corridors until she reached the hospital's administrative desk. The clerk handed her a stack of billing statements totaling well over $2,000. Ziliara's breath caught, but she presented the single text from Vorinth, wiring the amount. With a tapping of keys, the clerk confirmed the transaction. Ziliara exhaled, relief and guilt mingling in her chest. She would pay the price, but she would also remember how Vorintha's heart had grown so small. Back at Obsidian and Ash Atelier, twilight draped the market in violet shadows. Ziliara steeled herself for the confrontation. Vorinth would drive through the door any moment, expecting dinner and perhaps a quick apology. Instead, she lit a single candle at the work table, its flame flickering across rows of half-finished bespoke cloaks. The door swung open. Vorinth stepped in, uniform dusty, eyes cool. Zyphron peeked from the back, clutching her dolls, uncertain but curious. Vorinth tossed a crumpled envelope on the table. Wire came through, he said. Ziliara held his gaze. You weren't here when Zyphron needed you. Her voice was steady. You only sent money. His eyes narrowed. I've got responsibilities. And your top priority is? Her question hung like a challenge. He hesitated, jaw tightening. Don't turn this into. She cut him off. Don't lecture me on responsibility. You vanished when I needed a partner. You let our daughter suffer alone. Tears sparkled on her lashes, but her voice never wavered. Vorintha's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Words caught like fish on a hook. Silence stretched until he finally turned away. He nodded once, then strode out without another word. Ziliara sank into the edge of her chair.
Zyphron tiptoed over,
Wrapping small arms around her mother's waist. Ziliara hugged her fiercely, drawing comfort from the child's trusting warmth. The atelier's lanterns glowed behind them, promising another day of challenge, and another day to prove her unwavering love. In that fragile calm after the storm, Ziliara realized two truths. Family was not measured in money, and strength was forged in crisis. With Zyphron sleeping soundly in her arms, she whispered into the quiet, Now we rebuild. Together. And with that vow, Ziliara Asgrith prepared to redefine her life and her love for the battles yet to come. When the sun rose over Willow Fall's misty rooftops the morning after Zyphron's crisis, Ziliara Asgrith made a decision that would change everything. She would leave the cramped living quarters behind and move into her sister's cottage in Lavender Hollow. The air in Lavender Hollow was different, sweet with wildflowers and alive with humming bees among the blossoms. Ziliara packed only essentials, Zyphron's favorite obsidian moth cloak, a stack of unfinished orders, her grandmother's old thimble, and a satchel of hand-dyed fabrics. Her sister, Malix Thar, greeted them at the stone gate, arms open wide. Malix's home was built from pale timber, vines of lavender climbing its porch pillars. She ran a small floral studio, Thorn and Bloom, delivering bouquets to townsfolk and travelers alike. Malix swept Zyphron into a gentle hug, tucking the girl under her chin. "Welcome home," she whispered. "You two are safe here." The first week passed in a blur of adjustments. Zyphron explored the cottage's sunlit rooms, chasing butterflies in the garden, and perched on Malix's knee as she wrapped bouquets of purple lavender sprigs. At night, Ziliara set up a makeshift workstation in the loft, a sturdy table by a dormer window, lamps hung from rafters, and shelves cleared to hold her fabric rolls. The quiet hum of honeybees and the scent of crushed lavender soothed her. She vowed silently, "No more running. This is where we'll thrive." With Malix's encouragement, Ziliara rebranded the atelier for an online audience. She christened her new venture Obsidian and Ash Atelier, spotlighting the contrast of dark obsidian moths against soft ash-gray linens. After breakfast each morning, she carried Zyphron to Malix's yard and settled her at a small picnic table, where the girl drew chalk pictures on weathered wood while Ziliara filmed process videos on her phone, dyeing silk scarves in mountain well water, hand-stitching silver moth patterns, and cutting child-sized tunics from organic cotton. By week's end, Ziliara launched her first social media post, a time-lapse of her creating a midnight blue scarf dusted with metallic star threads, set to the gentle strum of a mandolin. She tagged #ObsidianChic and #Embreche. Within hours, her followers climbed from a handful to nearly 300. Comments poured in. "Love your process. That moth detail is stunning. Where can I buy one?" Each notification felt electric, a spark of possibility after weeks of isolation. Malix and Zyphron watched anxiously as Ziliara navigated direct messages and inquiries. "Remember," Malix said gently one afternoon, "this isn't a race. Quality and your unique touch are what people will pay for." Ziliara nodded, drafting a polite template response for price quotes and sizing options. 3 days later, she received a message from Luna and Loom, a small boutique in Silver Grove. The message read, "Love your #ObsidianChic pieces. Would you consider a wholesale order of 20 scarves? We'd like to feature them in next month's fall collection." Ziliara's heart hammered. A wholesale order meant production demands she'd never encountered. She studied her stock. 3 scarves completed, 2 in progress, and bolts of charcoal linen ready. She counted her resources, fabric, thread, dye, time, and realized she'd need help. Swallowing nerves, she replied, "I would be honored. I can fulfill an initial order of 10 scarves in 4 weeks. Let me know if that works." The boutique manager, Cash and Vale, responded within the hour. "Perfect. We'll start with 10, then scale up. Welcome aboard." That evening, Ziliara sealed the deal over tea with Malix. 10 scarves, she murmured, eyes bright with hope. "I can do this." Malix smiled and wrapped an arm around her. "I know you will." Over the next 2 weeks, Ziliara fell into a rigorous routine. Early dawns were spent sketching new moth designs and measuring bolts of linen. Afternoons were for cutting panels and stitching seams. Zyphron nestled underfoot with crayons and drawing pads. Evenings found Ziliara hunched over a dye vat, plunging fabric into bubbling indigo baths. Malix delivered fresh bouquets to the studio door, lavender to calm nerves, baby's breath for resilience. To keep track, Ziliara pinned a large calendar on the loft wall. Days ticked off in bright ink as orders grew. 10 scarves for Luna and Loom, 5 custom capes for a children's theater group, and inquiries for bespoke headbands. She cataloged each order number, client name, and delivery date, her confidence expanding with every checkmark. The real test came when the first Luna and Loom shipment was due. Ziliara spent a sleepless Saturday finishing the final hem on the 10th scarf. At dawn on Sunday, she bundled them in hand-stamped boxes, each tied with a sprig of lavender from Malix's garden and a handwritten note. "Thank you for believing in Obsidian and Ash. May these scarves bring warmth and wonder." She loaded them into her old hatchback and drove the winding lane to Silver Grove. Luna and Loom's storefront was a glass-fronted cottage on Main Street, its windows illuminated with golden string lights. The manager, Cash and Vale, greeted her with a firm handshake. "These are perfect," he said, running a single finger over the silk edge. "Our customers will love them." Back in Lavender Hollow, word of mouth spread. Neighbors asked for those moth scarves, and tourists spotted Zyphron draped in a petite cape embroidered in silver thread. A local lifestyle blog featured Ziliara in a Sunday spotlight. Meet the artisan bringing Gothic boho to Main Street. The article, complete with photos of Ziliara at her loom and Zyphron chasing butterflies, drove hundreds more to her online shop. Amid the whirlwind, Ziliara found daily solace in the cottage's back porch. When Zyphron napped, she'd sit beside Malix with cold lemonade, hands stained indigo from the vats. They'd laugh about the early days in the studio, failures turned lessons. Malix often teased, "Remember when you tried to dye your hair for that music festival?" And Ziliara snorted at the memory of cerulean blue streaks she'd washed out for weeks. One evening, as fireflies danced among the lavender stalks, Ziliara, felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in months. She watched Zyphron chase a moth in the golden field light, her daughter's laughter echoing like chimes. She thought of Vorinth and the silence he'd left behind. She thought of Draven Vale, the kind doctor whose texts checked on them both, and realized she was never truly alone. By the end of the month, Obsidian and Ash had processed over 30 orders, its little engine of creation humming day and night. Ziliara's arms bore new lines of strength, her mind pulsed with ideas, embroidered mittens, fringed shawls, even children's aprons with tiny obsidian accents. Each concept she sketched late at night grew richer in color and texture. With Malix's unwavering support and Zyphron's bright spirit, Ziliara had transformed crisis into opportunity. She wasn't just a seamstress anymore, she was an entrepreneur, a single mother forging a path with needle and thread. As the moon rose over Lavender Hollow, Ziliara tucked Zyphron into bed, kissed her forehead, and whispered a promise. "Tomorrow, we'll create even more magic." The next day, she would upload new product photos, schedule a video tutorial for DIY moth embroidery, and, if she was brave enough, reach out to one of the larger boutiques in the city. The road ahead would be long and lined with challenges, but here, surrounded by lavender and moonlight, Ziliara Askrith knew she was exactly where she belonged. Ziliara Askrith stood in the hush of Obsidian and Ash Atelier's upper loft, the only light a lone bulb swaying over the work table. Zyphron Keld slept soundly in the nursery below, her soft breathing the only proof that all was well for the moment. Ziliara's heart thudded with a fierce determination. Her daughter's safety and future depended on her next actions. Collecting indisputable proof of Vorinth's betrayal and negligence, she slipped a miniature voice recorder, no larger than a button, into the hollow base of a porcelain teacup that Vorinth always used. The recorder's red light was nearly invisible. She pressed it in place and hid the teacup on a desk shelf where no one would suspect anything. Across the room, she angled her phone's camera toward the atelier's front entrance, enabling motion-triggered recording. Every precaution was taken. The recording device was set to activate at precisely 11 p.m., ensuring she would capture whatever transpired when Vorinth returned from his overnight route. By the time the clock struck 11, Ziliara's nerves felt taut as violin strings. She pressed herself behind a tall stack of fabric bolts and held her breath. At exactly 11:17 p.m., the studio door creaked open. Vorinth Cyrus stepped inside, his uniform rumpled, eyes shadowed with fatigue. He tossed his duffel bag aside without a glance at the dozen half-finished capes and scarves strewn across the tables. Ziliara pivoted the teacup ever so slightly and tapped record on her phone. Every movement had to be imperceptible. Vorinth sank onto the stool by the stove, the splintered wood groaning under his weight. He removed his phone from his pocket and dialed a number. His voice, husky and low, slithered through the loft. "You there?" A woman's laughter whispered back, warm and intimate. Vorinth's tone shifted, softening in betrayal of his loyalty to Ziliara. "My wife's away with the baby. Perfect timing." The woman cooed. "Champagne's chilling. Don't be late." Vorinth's exhale came heavy with relief. On my way. At that moment, Ziliara's stomach knotted, but she could not afford panic. She slipped from her hiding spot, phone held low, blended into the shadows as she followed Vorntha's departure through the rear door. Outside, the night air bit at her cheeks. She stepped lightly across the cobblestones into the alley, positioning herself behind the atelier's stone wall. From this vantage point, she could glimpse the narrow lane leading to the back entrance of a nearby cafe. As promised, a sleek black sedan rolled into view at 11:45 p.m. Vorinth, silhouetted under a single street lamp, stepped out and approached the passenger side. A second figure emerged, a woman in a shimmering cocktail dress, her hair cascading over one shoulder. They embraced, and Ziliara raised her phone to capture the moment. The flash was disabled. The images were grainy but unmistakable, a clandestine liaison imprinted on her screen. With trembling fingers, she snapped 5 rapid photos before retreating to the studio. She slipped back inside, heart pounding as though it might burst from her chest. The recorder's capsule, nestled in the teacup, would preserve the incriminating audio. The camera contained the visual proof. But she still needed details of his financial irresponsibility. Her next target was the small office behind the atelier, where Vorinth stashed personal paperwork. She moved swiftly, unease fueling her urgency. The office door, normally locked, yielded to a hairpin, a skill she'd mastered during nights of desperation. Inside, dim desk lamp illuminating stacks of unopened mail. She rifled through towering envelopes until she found the familiar crest of Harborline Finance. Inside lay delinquency notices, one demanding $1,247.89, another warning of a 9% interest penalty if unpaid within 5 days. She photographed each letter, lining them up carefully so that account numbers and dates were legible. These documents would prove that Vorntha's debts endangered their family's security and undermined any claim he might make for shared living expenses. As dawn threatened on the horizon, Ziliara crouched over her laptop, transferring audio files from the recorder and photos from her phone and memory card. She created a secure folder labeled Evidence, Custody, and encrypted it with a password known only to her. The folder contained 4 audio recordings. The first captured Vorntha's whispered phone call at 11:17 p.m. The second, the woman's laughter and champagne reference. The third included Vorntha's muttered admission that "my wife's away with the baby" was code for Ziliara and Zyphron. The fourth recorded his harsh monologue later that week when he returned alone, ranting, "If you can't handle this circus, go live with your sister." The image folder held 7 photographs, 5 of the midnight rendezvous and 2 of the overdue notices from Harborline Finance. Each file bore a time stamp. By mid-morning, Ziliara had locked the flash drive into her grandmother's jewelry box, hidden in a false compartment beneath the atelier's floorboard.
Zyphron,
newly discharged from observation, clung to her mother's skirt as they returned to the renovated backroom apartment. Malixthar, Ziliara's sister and steadfast ally, offered comforting words and lavender-scented sachets to soothe anxieties. As Zyphron drifted into fitful sleep, Ziliara slipped away to the loft once more. She settled onto the edge of the work table, the weight of truth pressing down on her like 1,000 iron needles. She whispered into the receding quiet, "I will protect you, my brave star." She reviewed her plan. First, consult with Orlix Nyrith, the only attorney she trusted to navigate the storm that was coming. She would present the evidence in full. Audio recordings proving emotional abandonment and betrayal, photographs confirming infidelity, and financial records highlighting neglect. She would file for primary custody and request immediate child support and a restraining order if necessary. The final step would be to ensure Zyphron's and her own safety, establishing a domicile where Vorinth could no longer threaten her peace. As afternoon light filtered through the loft's lone window, painting motes of dust and gold, Ziliara finally allowed herself a moment's stillness. The dossier she had assembled was powerful, damning in its clarity, but carrying it meant irreversible consequences. It would destroy her marriage and irrevocably alter her life. Her pulse slowed as she acknowledged the weight of her choice. With a determined exhale, she gathered the flash drive and extinguished the loft lamp. Below, Zyphron stirred, and Ziliara descended the narrow staircase, resolve etched in every step. She would not waver now. The path ahead was treacherous, but necessary. In the quiet of Lavender Hollow that evening, Ziliara tucked Zyphron into bed and reached for her phone. She typed a single message to Orlix. "Urgent meeting. I have everything." With that, the next chapter of her fight for justice and safety began, one stitch of evidence woven into a tapestry of truth that no court could ignore. The week that followed Ziliara Azkritha's clandestine gathering of evidence blurred into a relentless rhythm of emails to her attorney and late-night stitches under the cold glow of her loft lamp. Each dawn found her at her sewing machine before Zyphron stirred, and every dusk saw her poring over custody statutes and procedural checklists. Yet amid this whirlwind of strategy and survival, a small thread of kindness wove its way into Ziliara's life, embodied in one singular figure, Draven Vale. She first encountered him on the second Thursday after Zyphron's fever. The county hospital's pediatric wing had become a second home, its antiseptic corridors etched into her memory. That morning, invited by her attorney's advice to gather medical records for the custody file, she arrived early and found the waiting area surprisingly empty. Zyphron clutched her obsidian moth doll, eyes wide but curious. Ziliara draped her in a pale blanket and took a seat beneath a muted painting of Blue Ridge Mountains. While she filled out paperwork, a steady voice broke the hush. "Zyphron, right? How's our little star feeling today?" Ziliara looked up to see him, Draven Vale. His coat bore the smooth badge of the county medical staff, and his gaze, warm, direct, unhurried, held genuine concern. He knelt before Zyphron, offering a friendly wave. Zyphron, typically wary of strangers, responded with a hesitant smile. Draven's presence felt like sunlight through frosted glass. It warmed her chest where worry had settled. "She's doing better," Ziliara managed, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her daughter's ear. "Thank you for her." Draven shook his head. "No thanks needed. You did so well through the crisis. I just want to make sure she stays that way." His badge glinted as he rose. "I'll review her vitals and send you the discharge report in an hour." True to his word, Draven emerged less than 60 minutes later with tidy reports and an encouraging smile. He handed Ziliara a set of papers, clear notes on medication, dietary recommendations, and follow-up visit schedules, each annotated with bright squares and check marks in the margins. Ziliara's pulse seized. "You make this look easy," she said, her voice catching. Draven's grin was easy, genuine. "I've seen too many parents frantic in this spot. You deserve clarity, not confusion." He offered a business card. "If you ever have questions day or night, call me." The card read simply, Dr. Draven Vale, D.O., Pediatrics. No pomp, no titles beyond what mattered. Ziliara tucked it into her wallet, the promise of assistance a small beacon in her storm. Over the following days, Draven showed up again and again in Ziliara's world. Sometimes it was a quick text checking on Zyphron's appetite, other times a coffee outside the hospital entrance with a steaming cup and a gentle counsel. Rest is part of recovery. Once, when Zyphron refused her afternoon snack in protest of being confined indoors, Draven arrived wielding a handmade popsicle, berry-flavored and frozen in advance, to coax her into eating fruit. Zyphron giggled through sticky teeth, and Ziliara felt gratitude spill through her like a sudden tide. Their rapport extended beyond childcare. On a rainy afternoon, Ziliara found herself trapped beneath an overturned umbrella outside the hospital chapel. Draven appeared from the entrance, shaking off his own umbrella. Without a word, he offered her shelter under his canopy and steered them both toward a brick overhang. They stood in companionable silence as raindrops tapped a steady tattoo on the sidewalk. "Thank you," Ziliara said finally, brushing water from her sleeve. Draven's voice was soft. "You're doing an extraordinary job under incredible pressure. Don't forget that." His eyes held a gentle intensity, no judgment, only understanding. Ziliara's breath caught. No one had said that to her in months. She managed a small smile. That means more than you know. In the atelier, those moments of kindness crystallized into quiet motivation. Ziliara would finish an afternoon sewing session and then answer a brief text from Draven reminding her of Zyphron's next checkup. His interest never felt prying. It felt protective. When she prepared for her first meeting with Orlix Nyrith, Ziliara printed Zyphron's pediatric records and bundled them into an envelope. Before tucking it closed, she added a note of thanks to Draven. Your care makes all the difference. X. She slipped it into the envelope alongside the legal documents. At Orlix's office, Ziliara presented the complete medical packet, her attorney's eyes widening at the thoroughness. You've done an impeccable job, Orlix said, tapping the folder. Evidence of neglect is strong, and your daughter's needs are clear. Dr. Vale's notes will carry great weight. Ziliara left the meeting with a firmer step, the weight of her responsibilities sliced by a sliver of hope. That hope blossomed fully the day she and Malix took Zyphron for a follow-up visit. Draven greeted them by name as they entered the pediatric suite. Zyphron bounded forward and flung her arms around his legs. Draven lifted her into his arms. My favorite patient, he teased, then turned to Ziliara. Impressive turnaround, from crisis to confidence. His eyes crinkled. She's thriving. Tears pricked at Ziliara's eyes. She wouldn't be here without you. He placed Zyphron back on the floor and handed a lollipop to the girl. Then he regarded Ziliara with thoughtful seriousness. You're a remarkable mother and business owner. You're building something beautiful for her. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Behind them, Malix beamed, arms folded in defiance of the struggles she'd seen Ziliara endure. But it was Draven's words that resonated most. In his genuine belief in her capacity, mother, artisan, protector, Ziliara found the embers of her own self-worth. Back at the atelier that evening, Ziliara rebranded the online shop's homepage to feature a small note. Thanks to Draven Vale, D.O., for his unwavering support in nurturing our little star. It was a quiet tribute, but to Ziliara it felt monumental, a declaration that she was not alone in this fight, that her daughter's health and happiness mattered to someone beyond herself. As October's leaves turned crimson and gold, Ziliara's life intertwined with Draven's in subtle, sustaining ways. Occasionally, they shared lunch, she in Sellers' apron smeared with indigo dye, he in a crisp white coat, but conversation never strayed far from Zyphron's well-being and Ziliara's quietly heroic pursuit of stability. He was her ally, a knight whose armor was empathy, whose sword was compassion. When the day came to file for custody, Ziliara carried Draven's referral letter and clean medical records as part of her dossier. In the courtroom's hush, she spotted Draven in the back row, offering a small, steady nod. That moment lent her courage. She was fighting not just for her daughter's legal rights, but for a future anchored in genuine care and respect. In the final plea, as Ziliara spoke of her vision for a safe, creative home for Zyphron, she remembered Draven's conviction. You're building something beautiful. And with that image vivid in her mind, the little girl laughing under a field of lavender, a mother stitching hope into every seam, Ziliara Askrith vowed to see it through, no matter the storm. Ziliara Askrith clutched her folder of evidence as she entered the imposing sandstone courthouse, its steps worn smooth by a century of visitors seeking justice. Behind her, Malix gently guided Zyphron held by the hand, the little girl's wide eyes reflecting both curiosity and apprehension. The autumn breeze carried the scent of falling leaves, a brittle reminder that time marched ever onward. Today marked the beginning of Ziliara's fight to secure her daughter's future, and she was armed with truth, determination, and the steely counsel of attorney Orlix Nyrith. Orlix, a tall figure in a charcoal gray suit, waited for them in the lobby. His sharp features softened into a reassuring smile as he approached. Good morning, Ziliara. Zyphron, he greeted, kneeling to meet the child's gaze. I'm honored to stand with you both. Ziliara inhaled, drawing courage from Orlix's unwavering confidence. The trio passed through security scanners and into the marbled halls, the hush punctuated only by distant footsteps and the echo of doors shutting. In a small waiting chamber, Orlix laid out their strategy: file for primary custody, child support, and a restraining order to keep Vorinth at bay until the hearings concluded. He reminded Ziliara that each piece of evidence, from voice recordings and incriminating photographs to finance statements and Draven Vale's medical reports, would weave together a compelling narrative of neglect and betrayal. Their first hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. During that interval, Ziliara balanced her days between fulfilling orders at Obsidian and Ash Atelier and reviewing legal documents in the evenings. Orlix provided detailed notes on custody law, best interest standards, parental fitness evaluations, and the importance of demonstrating a stable environment. He scrutinized every detail of Ziliara's evidence, advising her how to present it in court without appearing vindictive. Focus on Zyphron's welfare, he stressed. Show the judge why you are the parent best suited to nurture her. When the hearing day arrived, Ziliara donned her grandmother's charcoal gray shawl, a talisman of resilience. Orlix guided her into courtroom 4B, its oak-paneled walls heavy with history. The judge, a poised woman with silver hair and keen eyes, presided from an elevated bench. Vorinth Syra stood at the opposing table, his posture rigid, his expression carefully neutral. His attorney, a polished man in a navy suit, arranged files and murmured quietly. Ziliara Askrith versus Vorinth Syra. The court clerk intoned, her voice echoing against the vaulted ceiling. We shall begin this hearing on custodial arrangements and preliminary orders. The judge peered over her glasses at Ziliara. Mrs. Askrith? Ziliara's voice quavered at first as she introduced herself. She then spoke plainly of her daughter's needs: consistent medical care, nurturing educational environment, and freedom from emotional distress. She recounted the emergency hospitalization, the repeated neglect by Vorinth, and the tangible proof she had gathered. Orlix then rose to present their evidence. One by one, he introduced Draven Vale's pediatric reports, detailing Zyphron's recovery and ongoing health requirements. He handed the judge a printed transcript of the late-night voice recording. Vorinth's admission that his wife and child were conveniently out of the way for his clandestine rendezvous. Accompanying photographs depicted Vorinth slipping into a black sedan with a clearly recognizable silhouette at midnight. Lastly, the finance statements from Harborline Finance revealed mounting debt that threatened the family's financial security. The judge examined each binder with meticulous care, occasionally nodding. Vorinth's attorney countered by arguing that work-related stress and youthful indiscretion should not overshadow a father's right to shared custody. He downplayed the recordings as emotional outbursts, the photos as a harmless affair, and the debt notices as a separate financial issue, not a matter of parenting. His tone remained courteous, but Ziliara sensed a hidden smirk whenever her attorney applauded the strength of their case. After presentations, the judge called for an immediate preliminary ruling on temporary custody. She voiced concern over the volatility of Vorinth's situation: overnight absences, emotional unavailability, and financial instability. Turning to Orlix, she remarked on the thoroughness of the medical evidence. She then addressed Vorinth. Mr. Syra, do you believe you can provide consistent care for your daughter at this time? Vorinth's response, measured yet evasive, did little to reassure the bench. My wife will handle the day-to-day, Your Honor, he said, avoiding mention of his trips. I can contribute financially. The judge raised an eyebrow. Financial support is one aspect. Parenting involves daily engagement, presence, and emotional availability. She then announced a temporary order. Zyphron would primarily reside with Ziliara, with supervised visitation for Vorinth at specified times. Vorinth's shoulders slumped, and he cast Ziliara a look of resentment before being escorted out. Outside the courtroom, Ziliara felt a surge of relief tempered by the gravity of the battle still to come. This is only step one, Orlix reminded her. We've secured safety and stability for Zyphron. Next is the comprehensive custody trial. Over the following month, the trial commenced in earnest. Witnesses appeared. Malik Thar testified to Ziliara's steadfast care, weaving stories of midnight crafting sessions turned into impromptu bedtime lullabies. Draven Vale provided medical testimony, his calm voice describing Zyphron's medical fragility and the necessity of a nurturing environment. Ziliara herself answered questions about her atelier, her financial strategy, and her daily routines. She spoke unflinchingly of the creative discipline that allowed her to balance motherhood and entrepreneurship. Vorntha's defense launched its own witnesses. A distant cousin spoke of Vorntha's work ethic and claimed he had always provided for the family financially. A colleague from the bus line testified to Vorntha's dedication on long hauls. Each portrait painted Voronth as a man responsible and reliable at work. But under Orlix's cross-examination, cracks appeared. Voronth admitted to moments of weakness when finances became tight, to postponing calls to check on Zyphron during overnight runs, and to hiding debts from his wife to avoid her stress. The judge's gaze remained keen, absorbing each stumble. The courtroom drama reached its crescendo when Orlix called Voronth himself to the stand. The air tightened as Vorntha's expression hardened. Orlix began with questions of general temperament. Mr. Syra, how often have you personally changed your daughter's bedding or prepared her meals? Vorntha's silent glare spoke volumes before he finally muttered, occasionally. Orlix pressed. Can you describe any time you stayed home overnight solely to care for Zyphron? Vorntha's answer faltered. Travel schedules are demanding. Orlix then presented the financial statements. These notices from Harborline Finance, are those unpaid balances in your name? Voronth swallowed. Yes. Orlix leaned forward. Do you dispute that these debts could jeopardize your ability to meet your daughter's needs? Vorntha strained, no, left the court in silence. Throughout the trial, Ziliara watched Voronth unravel, the confident mask slipping. When the final witness exited, the courtroom paused for one last recess before closing arguments. Orlix rose with the calm authority of a seasoned litigator. He spoke of Ziliara's proven record of care, her thriving business that provided financial stability, her unwavering presence during Zyphron's illnesses, and the loving home she created with her sister's support. He contrasted it with Vorntha's pattern of absence, deception, and financial recklessness. He reminded the judge that primary custody rested with the parent best able to meet the child's holistic needs, physical, emotional, and developmental. Vorntha's attorney countered with appeals to paternal rights and the hope for co-parenting, but his arguments rang hollow in light of the robust evidence. As the judge called for closing statements, Ziliara rose with Orlix's nod. Her voice, steady and sincere, spoke directly to the court. My daughter deserves more than financial support. She deserves a mother who stands by her bedside when she's sick, who crafts each blanket with love, and who builds a life filled with consistency and hope. I ask this court to entrust me with her care, so she can flourish without fear. The judge studied Ziliara's determined face, then turned to Voronth. His posture was a rigid silhouette of a father who had chosen distance over devotion. The gavel fell. In the interest of the child's well-being, this court awards primary physical custody of Zyphron Keld to Mrs. Ziliara Asgrith. Mr. Syra shall have supervised visitation every other weekend, subject to the recommendations of Dr. Draven Vale. Further, Mr. Syra is ordered to remit monthly child support of $1,200, adjusted for the child's health needs. Court is adjourned. Silence reigned until the clerk's echoing knock. Then, the room exhaled. Ziliara felt Orlix's hand on her shoulder, a steady anchor. Zyphron emerged from Malix's arms with a puzzled look until Ziliara scooped her up, whispering, Everything's going to be okay, my star. Voronth watched from across the room, jaw clenched, before being gently guided away. As they left the courtroom, Ziliara and Zyphron stepped into a golden late-afternoon sun. The legal battle had been arduous, stretching her resolve to its limit. Yet in that moment, she felt an overwhelming sense of triumph. Not for the courtroom victory itself, but for the promise of a stable, loving future she had secured for her daughter. On the courthouse steps, Orlix quietly handed Ziliara the signed order. "You did what you had to do," he said softly. "Now you both can begin to heal." Ziliara folded the papers carefully and placed them beside Zyphron's hand, intertwined with her own. As they descended the steps into the crisp autumn air, the world felt unexpectedly bright, each rustling leaf a testament to the endurance of hope and the unbreakable bond between mother and child. In the weeks after the courtroom's gavel fell, Obsidian and Ash Atelier blossomed in ways Ziliara Asquith had once only dared to imagine. With legal custody secured and child support flowing reliably, the atelier no longer teetered on the brink of financial ruin. Instead, it entered a new era of expansion, community engagement, and creative innovation, anchored by the steadfast support of her sister Malix Thar and the quiet strength of Draven Vale. The first sign of change arrived in the form of a regional lifestyle magazine feature entitled Heart and Thread, The Rise of Obsidian and Ash, complete with portraits of Zyphron Keld draped in a miniature cloak embroidered with obsidian moths. Sales inquiries poured in overnight. Specialty boutiques from Charleston to Seattle requested bespoke collections, wedding planners sought custom bridesmaid shawls, and fashion bloggers clamored for behind-the-scenes peeks. Ziliara's website traffic surged tenfold. Her modest Shopify template buckled under the weight of simultaneous orders, forcing her to upgrade to a dedicated server. When the atelier's nightshade scarf sold out in under 24 hours, she realized she had tapped into something larger than a local craft niche. It was a genuine brand, with a global audience hungry for authentic craftsmanship. Rather than succumb to the pressure, Ziliara embraced it. She formalized her production workflow. Mornings were reserved for design sketches and digital mock-ups, afternoons for dye baths and stitching, and evenings for quality control and packaging. Malix repurposed her flower studio's back room as a fulfillment center, where sprigs of lavender accompanied each shipment, tied with a hand-lettered thank you note.
Zyphron,
now free of recurring fevers thanks to Draven Vale's ongoing medical guidance, took pride in stamping each box with a signature obsidian moth seal, her small fingers leaving perfect imprints of joy. Word of Ziliara's entrepreneurial turnaround spread beyond fashion circles into leadership forums. She was invited to speak at a regional Women in Business conference, where she recounted her journey from crisis to stability. She spoke candidly of the nights she cried over mounting bills, of the determination that kept her hand moving across the fabric even when her heart was breaking, and of the critical role Draven's compassion and Orlix Nyratha's counsel had played. Her closing line, "Resilience is the truest stitch in the tapestry of life," drew a standing ovation and led to a dozen new wholesale partnerships within weeks. Recognizing the atelier's potential as a community hub, Ziliara launched a series of weekend, stitch and sip workshops held in the lavender-lined courtyard of her sister's cottage. These intimate gatherings invited up to 12 participants each session to learn hand embroidery techniques while sipping local honey-infused tea. Word spread quickly. Mothers and daughters, retiree craft clubs, even corporate teams seeking unconventional team-building experiences signed up. Zyphron, ever the helper, greeted guests at the entrance with a tiny welcome packet of lavender buds and a smile that melted hearts. By sundown, the courtyard hummed with chatter, laughter, and the rhythmic click of needles, evidence that creativity could indeed heal old wounds. With financial stability established, Ziliara reinvested in sustainable materials. She partnered with a small mill in Vermont to mill organic cotton of the softest quality and sourced ethically harvested cashmere from family farms in Mongolia. Each new Eco-Ember collection scarf came with a hang tag detailing the exact origin of its fibers. The initiative earned her a spot in an eco-fashion showcase in Portland, where her runway piece, a floor-length shawl woven with chemical-free dyes and embroidered by Zyphron herself, drew applause for its elegance and environmental responsibility. The atelier's next milestone was securing a permanent storefront in downtown Willow Fall. The space was a century-old brick building, its creaky floors and exposed beams echoing with hidden stories. Ziliara negotiated a 5-year lease, envisioning a shop filled with handcrafted garments, glass display cases of vibrant textiles, and a corner for live demonstrations. The grand opening, attended by Malix, Orlix, Draven, and a crowd of loyal customers, was marked by a ribbon woven from leftover fabric scraps. Draven cut the ribbon with a ceremonial pair of vintage scissors. Zyphron toddled forward to place a single lavender bloom on the counter. Inside, every inch radiated warmth. Walls painted in soft gray to complement the rich hues of autumnal tapestry, pendant lights fashioned from repurposed mason jars. Shelves lined with Ziliara's signature pieces and rotating guest collections from other local artisans. A small reading nook offered coffee, herbal tea, and craft magazines. Above the doorway, hand-carved letters spelled Obsidian and Ash Atelier, the signpost of a dream realized. The months that followed saw the atelier become a beacon of creative commerce. Holiday pop-up markets in larger cities showcased limited edition starfall, capes glittered with metallic moth clusters. Collaborations with a fine jewelry designer led to a line of mother-daughter bracelets featuring obsidian beads, a bestseller during Mother's Day promotions. Zyphron's own whimsical fairy flight prints, born of her chalk drawings in Lavender Hollow, were transferred onto soft muslin blankets, launching a children's decor line that flew off the shelves faster than any scarf. When Draven Vale returned to Willowfall for a routine checkup, one of many follow-ups to monitor Zyphron's health, he stepped into the atelier storefront for the first time. Ziliara guided him through the space with a proud grin, her hands skimming over fabric bolts, her eyes alight. Draven paused beneath a display of lullaby throw blankets, embroidered with constellations. "You've created something extraordinary," he said, his voice hushed with awe. "This isn't just a business. It's a living, breathing community." In recognition of the atelier's impact, the town council awarded Obsidian and Ash the Willow Falls Small Business of the Year accolade. The ceremony, held in the renovated town hall, saw Ziliara give a brief acceptance speech. She spoke of the challenges she'd faced: bank notices, broken promises, fear that she wasn't enough. But she also credited Malix's steadfast support, Orlix's unwavering guidance, Draven's compassionate presence, and Zyphron's unshakable spirit. "This award belongs to all of us," she concluded, tears shining in her eyes, "to everyone who believed that art, love, and resilience could conquer every obstacle." With that triumph came ambitious plans for the future. Ziliara enrolled in a part-time business management course at the local community college. She began mentoring eager newcomers through an online forum she founded, Thread and Thrive, offering tips on small batch production, marketing strategies, and work-life balance. Malix expanded her floral services to offer ember bouquets, arrangements featuring dried moth motifs nestled among blossoms, a whimsical nod to Ziliara's signature style. Even Zyphron chipped in. She designed the atelier's official mascot, a grinning obsidian moth with tiny wings that became a digital sticker kit for social media. Yet despite her meteoric rise, Ziliara never lost sight of her original mission: to provide a safe, nurturing home for her daughter. Each morning, before drafting new designs, she brewed a pot of chamomile and clover tea to share with Zyphron at the breakfast table. They'd plan the day together, Zyphron recounting dreams of purple fields and friendly moths, Ziliara sketching those notions onto her notepad. At night, she tucked Zyphron into bed beneath a hand-stitched midnight whisper quilt, each star a promise that love could outshine any darkness. On one crisp evening in November, Ziliara stood at the studio's back window, gazing at the glowing town lights and the lavender hedge beyond. Draven stepped up behind her, wrapping an arm around her waist. Zyphron's laughter drifted out of sight as she chased fireflies in the garden with Malix. Ziliara leaned into Draven's warmth, thinking of how far they'd come, from the turmoil of collapsed trust to the flourishing of a brand, a home, and a family. "I never imagined it would look like this," she whispered. Draven pressed a gentle kiss to her temple. "You dreamed it into existence." You're unstoppable. Ziliara turned in his arms, eyes bright.
We are.
And as the atelier's workshop lights dimmed for the night, Obsidian and Ash Atelier stood not just as a testament to creative skill, but as a monument to hope, resilience, and the enduring power of starting anew. Ziliara Askrith closed the ledger on her desk and leaned back in her chair, the glow of late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the polished oak floor of Obsidian and Ash Atelier. Xiphron Keld, now sprightly and full of laughter, chased drifting shawl ribbons as they fluttered like tiny dark moths in the breeze. This final chapter of their journey was never about mere survival. It was about transcending adversity and weaving a future rich with purpose, creativity, and unwavering love. From the day Xiphron's fever first sent Ziliara racing through the night toward the county hospital, her path had been paved with trials that tested every fiber of her resolve. The shattering discovery of Vorinth Syra's betrayal, the endless nights spent gathering damning evidence, and the high-stakes courtroom battles had revealed her deepest fears and her greatest strength. Amid those tumultuous chapters, she unearthed allies she could never have anticipated. Malix Thar's steadfast sisterhood, Dr. Draven Vale's compassionate mentorship, and Orlix Nyratha's fearless advocacy. Each had lent a vital thread to the tapestry of Ziliara's resilience.
Now,
in the atelier's sunlit heart, Ziliara reflected on the lessons that had shaped her: perseverance in the face of despair, creativity as both refuge and revolution, and the truth that a mother's love could be both a balm and a sword. She had watched as Obsidian and Ash transformed from a fragile dream into a beacon of artistry, sustainability, and community, proof that adversity, when met with unwavering determination, could ignite a force far stronger than any storm. Xiphron, perched on a low stool, beamed up at her mother and held out a small obsidian moth pin she had crafted from clay. Her dark eyes glowed with pride. "Mama, I made this for you." Ziliara accepted the pin with tremulous joy, fastening it to her lapel. In that simple gift lay Xiphron's trust, the belief that her mother, no matter the obstacles, would always transform hardship into beauty. As evening settled, Ziliara gathered Xiphron on her hip and drifted through the atelier's new storefront. The brick walls, once bare, now bore framed photographs of the atelier's milestones, that first magazine cover, the ribbon cutting at Willow Falls storefront opening, the small business of the year, plaque gleaming in the entryway. Each image chronicled not just triumphs, but the quiet acts of courage that made them possible. Staying up all night to meet a deadline, comforting a scared little girl in a hospital hallway, refusing to surrender to fear even when her path seemed impossibly steep. Ziliara paused before a chalkboard painted on the far wall, her inspiration board, where she pinned letters from customers whose lives had been touched by her work. One card, from a mother in Charleston, described how a custom blanket kept her own sick daughter warm through chemotherapy. Another, from a bride in Napa Valley, thanked Ziliara for a delicate shawl that lent comfort during a rainy outdoor ceremony. Tucked between these heartfelt messages was a folded note in her sister's handwriting. "Never forget who you are, a mother, an artist, a warrior." Ziliara's breath wavered as she smoothed her palm over the note's faded edges. Later that night, after Xiphron slept in the nursery beneath a quilt of midnight blue moths, Ziliara settled into her grandmother's rocker by the window. She cupped her hands around a warm mug of chamomile tea, its gentle fragrance lulling her into reflection. Outside, the moon cast silver spokes across the garden's lavender blooms. In the quiet, she allowed herself to feel the full arc of her journey. The raw pain of betrayal, the adrenaline-fueled quest for justice, the thrill of entrepreneurial triumph, and the abiding love that had guided her through every twist of fate. Drawing in a steady breath, she reached for her journal, a simple leather-bound book where she had recorded hopes, fears, and revelations. On the blank page before her, she wrote, "In every seam I have sown, I have stitched my heart. In every trial I have faced, I have pressed my feet forward. For my daughter's smile, I have crossed deserts of doubt. For my own dignity, I have hunted truth in darkness. Today, I stand unbowed. This atelier is more than fabric and thread. It is the embodiment of a mother's unbreakable will. She closed the journal and placed it on the side table, its pages filled with the testament of her growth. In the days to come, she knew there would be fresh challenges, new designs to perfect, partnerships to cultivate, and the ever-present balancing act of motherhood and artistry. Yet she also knew this: no matter how fierce the winds of adversity might blow, she possessed a steadfast compass within her heart. As dawn approached, Ziliara rose and tiptoed to Zyphron's cradle. She brushed wet hair back from her daughter's forehead and whispered, "My dear star, the world is ours to create." Zyphron blinked sleepily, then smiled, as if promising to shine her own light upon every new day. Obsidian and Ash Atelier had become a living legacy, not only of exquisite craftsmanship, but of the power inherent in facing life's darkest moments with courage and compassion. Through her artistry, Ziliara had offered beauty to a world shadowed by monotony. Through her motherhood, she had demonstrated that the fiercest love was also the most transformative. In that final moment before dawn's first glow, Ziliara looked out across the lavender fields and Willow Fall's distant lights. She felt the weight of her journey settle into quiet confidence. The stitch of adversity had become the fabric of her life, and in its pattern she saw her story, one of unyielding spirit, boundless love, and the unwavering truth that a mother would move mountains to carve a safe haven for her child. And so, as the atelier's doors remained closed for just a few more hours of rest, the world slept under a quilt of obsidian and ash, waiting for the next chapter in Ziliara Azkritha's extraordinary tale of resilience, artistry, and maternal devotion. And that brings us to the end of today's story on TrueStory Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.